At the conclusion of season 1 of the Reforming Men podcast, we were faced with a decision. We could sunset the project and call it done, or we could pick back up in the fall for season 2. And in my mind, and in the mind of Matt Adams, immediately the choice was clear. We must keep going. There's an incredible need for content directly aimed at men in the PCA. There's more confusion in the world now than ever about what a man is and what a woman is and what we're supposed to do and be out in society. Men in the reformed world are constantly being drawn into the chaos and rot of complementarianism and egalitarianism, both of which are completely and utterly unbiblical. One is on its face incompatible with nature and the scriptures, and the other is rooted and founded in a false doctrine of the Trinity. And so, as we did in season 1, we will continue to give you a biblical perspective on masculinity, drawing from the wisdom of various brothers in the PCA and maybe even outside of the PCA. We hope to give you a biblically oriented confessional perspective on what men are supposed to be and how we are supposed to live as husbands and fathers, pastors, deacons, churchmen, laborers out in the marketplace, and even as representatives in the civil sphere. Brothers, fathers, God has called us to be men, not just by product of making us male, but in the scriptures, he has given us a very clear mandate and description of what that means. We don't have a choice. We are what God created us to be, but we do have a decision to make. We can choose to be faithful. We can choose to do hard things. We can choose to be godly and Christian men in a day and an age in which that's no longer popular out in society. And even at times, being a godly and faithful man is not even popular in the church. Nevertheless, we must forge ahead. There is no other option. So with that in mind, welcome to season 2 of the Reforming Men podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Reforming Men podcast. Today I'm joined by a co-host, Matt Adams, and our guest today is Mark Robinson. Mark is a teaching elder in the Pittsburgh Presbytery and the PCA, and he serves as stated supply at Kiski Valley, a PCA church, and he also teaches Bible at Trinity Christian School, and he serves as an adjunct instructor at Reformed Presbyterian Theological Seminary. So we're happy to have him with us today. I first became aware of Mark a few years ago at Fort Oglethorpe PCA. He was preaching for us during our Presbytery meeting in the Tennessee Valley Presbytery, and I was impressed with him and have followed him online ever since, and have been impressed with his demeanor and his ability to engage. And Mark, I value you as a thinker. I can name a couple occasions in the past 4 or 5 years in which your clear thinking has helped sharpen my own. And so, thank you for joining us today, brother.
Oh, my privilege. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, one of the things that I think you can help us think through today as men, something that I have, if I can use the word felt for the last decade or so, is it seems like in the PCA and even in evangelicalism as a whole, having grown up on Mr. Rogers, which was a fitting tone for a child. That was kind of the whole point, is to make children feel safe and heard and understood. I often feel like now, as an adult man with children of my own, that so much preaching and teaching, formal and informal, is almost like guys doing their own Mr. Rogers thing in that tone, but not speaking to children, but adults, even adult men. And so, there's got to be a more masculine tone, or as you have put it, a masculine key in which we can teach and preach. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on, especially for those of us that are listening, that are teaching elders or ruling elders, and we have a duty and responsibility to teach in the church, or if there are listeners that are in your capacity as a teacher in an actual Christian school. How can we teach or preach in a masculine key, and should we even bother? Is the Mr. Rogers thing good? Is it okay? Just take it away.
Um, actually, I think the Mister Rogers thing. I think you hit it. It's a kind of cultural moment. Um, I think he gave, yeah, vent to kind of the way the '60s and the '50s with the sort of move towards psychological engagement and therapeutic engagement of people. Um, the tone that kind of took, softer tones, being nice, comfortable, making people feel safe. I think, and this a lot of this stems from, and you mentioned it, my experience with teaching classes at school, high schoolers, which tend to be 50-50 classes, 50% boys, 50% girls, and seeing how they respond to how I present. And it's just very clear to me that you're not going to engage boys in a way that they should be engaged in a teaching environment if you talk to them the way you talk to girls to make them feel comfortable. It's just not going to work. And one of the things that came up, Tony Esolen, who was a Catholic professor, he wrote this article on agonism, how boys learn through struggle,
Mm.
and it just really hit me a couple years ago. It crystallized something I had intuited for a while. If I'm going to engage boys, and this is like teaching in a masculine key, I'm going to need to challenge them. I'm going to need to push on them. I'm going to need to say, there's a hill. You guys need to give everything you got to run up that hill. Um, there's a dragon. Okay, let's work toward how we're going to kill that dragon. They need to like feel a challenge that causes them to push harder, to go
Mm.
further. Else they're going to be bored.
Yeah.
Um, they don't need little how you feeling, all of this. I'm making these kind of universalistic claims, but
Hmm.
you can qualify them in any given situation. But definitely, I think teaching in a masculine key includes a real a an acknowledgement that agonism is a way that God has made boys to grow and learn. When I was in seventh grade, we would challenge each other who could lift the most weights in gym class. I could do 110, and the next guy, he's got a masculine flex. I'll do 120.
Yeah.
We're always doing that. You wrestle. The boys do it in my classes. They challenge each other. They flex. They're like, no, that's not the answer. This is the answer. They challenge. It's a kind of like learn by pushing on one another. And they inflict violence as a way of kind of ritualistic greetings. The boys come into class and they'll bump chest or they'll slap each other. It's just, there's something distinctly masculine about that. And if we don't calculate for that in our pedagogical instruction, in our discipleship and formation, you will absolutely lose them.
Yeah.
So that's an absolute necessity. I do it in my class. And, not to get into like some other issues, but what are the consequences of that is it gets some, and you don't want to do this, but sometimes the girl's feelings are a little bit hurt because there's a kind of directness, and there's a challenge, and sometimes I don't adapt back to a way in which I think would be conducive to like 15-year-old girls.
Mm.
So I don't know. That's just a little bit. So I think teaching in the masculine key needs, practically speaking, attentiveness to the element of struggle, agonism, by which boys learn,
Yeah,
by
Mark.
which we grow. Yeah.
Mark, there's so much that I kind of want to tease out there in your explanation of what you mean by preaching and teaching in a masculine key. I think the first place that I want to go, even before we start talking about this, idea of a theology of niceness that the church has really taken upon itself. But recently, I was listening to the briefing with Al Mohler, and he was talking about some of the trends that we're seeing with Gen Z men. And
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it was really fascinating because not only was he doing it, on the heels of the Charlie Kirk assassination, but he was talking about just simply the fact that the values of men, not only spiritually, has increased tremendously,
Mm-hmm.
but even the desire to get married and have children. And so when we're talking about how you mentioned, sometimes we teach a little harder or we preach a little harder to men, yet that's what's really needed, isn't it? In this cultural moment, we can all joke and laugh about Mr. Rogers, but in a way, he was meeting that cultural need at the time because we were, as Aaron Wrenn says, we were in this kind of positive Christian world where we could actually be nice and still gain an audience, and even with our niceness motivate people to action. But now that we've moved quickly through the neutral world into a negative Christian world, this idea of really challenging our boys, really challenging our men, is necessary because, I mean, sociologically, the trend is the way the men go, the households go, or the way the men goes, even society goes. No matter how much we want to deny that male influence has that much standing in society, we have seen stronger men produce a stronger culture. And so I thought it'd be good to maybe hear you speak to that. Why would we sacrifice maybe being as influential to the girls in a class or the women in our congregation to motivate our men to more faithfulness or more obedience, or motivate our men to charge that hill or slay that dragon? What's the gain in doing that?
Yeah, I tell the team. One of the things that I used to do, I guess I don't do this as much. I coordinate chapel, and I would always call on a boy to come up and pray because I wanted to inculcate in them some courage. And when the girls would complain, why don't you call girls to come up and pray? I said, look, you can pray in your seat. You don't need to pray in front of people. One, two. You in 10 years are going to come to pastors like me and complain that there aren't boys who take initiative. I'm helping these boys become the kind of man that you in 10 years will want to marry. So I think to answer your question, Matt, is if you do not develop boys, if we do not help them be men in the way that God has created them to be, you will not have the kind of society and civilization that God has intended for us to create and to make to his glory. So if you lose the men, you lose everything. There's not, Zimmerman wrote that book at Harvard back in the 50s, Civilization and Marriage or something. And he talked about how, we basically have no example of a matriarchal civilization. Not one, not a single one. And where women start ascending into the positions that men occupied in leadership, that was always, in every case, an indication that civilization was failing. Late stage civilizations they normalize homosexuality and female leadership.
Right.
So we just will not have a functioning society, civilization, not to be catastrophic, but we won't have those things if we do not intentionally cultivate men. And one of the sad byproducts of that, because we're not perfect, is that's going to offend a lot of women. But godly women like that.
Yeah.
I find that these godly young girls, they might cringe a little bit at some of but they deep down inside, they like these men that take risks. They like these guys that step forward and take initiative, even when it's clumsy and they're falling. There's something in them that responds to that. We know that's just the way God created us. Right. He created them to respond to true masculinity. It's beautiful.
Yep. One of the things we were doing some Doctrine of God material during our midweek prayer meeting from the larger catechism, and we got to creation and how God created man. And I brought this out. I have a church full of, especially at prayer meeting, right? But we just got all the ladies there are just devout Bible-believing ladies, and they're they would rightly say, well, yeah, God established man to be the head of the family, the head of the household. Of course, as he creates man and then woman from the rib of the man, he is creating this family unit, and he is putting Adam at the head, in charge of this family. And all that is right, all that is true, and yet at the very same time, in creating Adam first and giving him dominion over all the creatures, he is establishing a civilization, that is to be ruled by men. And that's not, because of the rise of feminism, of course, that is controversial and that is offensive. But I have seen exactly what you're saying, either in pastoral counseling, when meeting with a husband and wife who are having marital issues, or talking to a college student who is looking for a husband, or even parents struggling to raise their children. There is a real beauty and a longing for men to be who the Bible calls them to be, right? I wish my husband wasn't so passive. I wish my husband would take the lead. I wish I could find a man who really lived out his faith and was pursuing, success, or pursuing a vocation, who works hard, and so all those things are true. And I do think I love that answer that you gave. When I tell the girls, why, when they're complaining about not getting to pray in front of everybody at chapel, I'm just trying to help these men be who you want to marry one day. And I tell my son that often when I have to discipline him or correct him. I'm saying, listen, I'm just trying to make you a biblical man. I'm trying to make you a better man than your dad is. I want a woman to want to marry you. I want you to be a good father one day. And going back to what you were saying, even the best discipline for him is not time out. It's not even a spanking, even though we do spank our kids. But it's something physical. It's running sprints up and down the road. It's running laps after a soccer practice or a baseball practice or something. They respond better to that, even in discipline, right? And I coached football for 10 years at the Christian school that we have under the umbrella of our ministry here, and the dads loved it when I made their kids run, and their moms hated it.
Oh yeah.
It's just part of the way in which the fall has kind of skewed the way that we think about the differences between male and female. Nate, I want to keep prodding, if that's okay with you.
Go for it, man.
That Mark said.
Yeah. I'm enjoying listening to you guys talk back and forth, so this is great.
This is a little bit of a pet topic. I actually wrote something on this right before General Assembly for the Gospel Reformation Network that I sit on the General Council for. And it just, the title of it was "Why We Must Speak the Truth Even When It Isn't Nice." This theology of niceness, it often comes with, it usually costs us. How about that? It usually costs us some layer of the truth. And you hit on it when we start thinking about even the way in which we address things like sin with therapeutic language. That we're not guilty, we're broken. Why is it when truth is sacrificed for comfort, why is it that everyone ultimately suffers from that?
I think so many things. The first thing that comes to my mind in the context of teaching, so when we're soft and not direct with the truth, is you actually disable people's development. Jonathan Haidt wrote that book, The Coddling of the American Mind, and he mentions like 3 or 4 things, and one of them is safetyism. How treating kids so carefully, that you're not even letting them be exposed to even the least kinds of sicknesses and things actually weakens their immune system. So I think treating people so very softly and therapeutically and avoiding the sharpness of truth, the rebukes that heal, actually disables people. It makes us too fragile. You won't be able to engage the harshness of the world. You won't be able to face the severity of a fallen world and the decisions you have to make if you've constantly been shielded from. And this is the kind of, you mentioned about the football parents. This is the mom is more inclined to that kind of careful nurture, and the dad is get out there, You're getting out of the. You're getting out of.
Right? Yeah,
Yes, run faster. You
You
throw
know,
up. Okay, get. We'll clean that up later. Keep going. I don't want to be. Too.
no, yeah, that's I mean
So we
exactly right.
disable. I think one of the practical effects is, Solomon talks about rebuke a man, he's wiser, right? He's better. Like he talks about how correction and rebuke improve people. So take that out, they're not
Mm,
being improved. They're not being
yeah,
strengthened. They're not having their hide toughened. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the things that Paul tells Timothy is that the scriptures re- rebuke and
Yes.
reprove, right? And that's
Yes.
good. I remind my congregation all the time: don't hate when the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit is convicting you in the middle of the
Right.
sermon. The Holy Spirit is
Right.
sanctifying you.
Right.
The work of sanctification, yes, is a building up
Mm-hmm.
into Christ likeness, but oftentimes it
Mm-hmm.
hurts because sanctification is taking the sword of
Mm-hmm.
sin and slaughtering
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it. And I know that's so unlike how we want to treat our sin. We want to coddle
Mm-hmm.
it. We want to take it for nice romantic walks on the
Mm-hmm.
beach. But the same is true when it comes to training up boys, teaching and discipling men. Is you know we respond better as men when we are called to the carpet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it might
Mm-hmm.
hurt and it might be embarrassing, but I think about the ways in which my own father disciplined me and
Mm-hmm.
corrected me, or how I've been corrected growing up working at a grocery
Mm-hmm.
store, or even having hard conversations with elders regarding our ministry together in the
Mm-hmm.
church. Sometimes the best motivating factor for us, the way we're wired, is that
Mm-hmm.
challenge, is that sense in which I don't want to look stupid again in front of the rest of the
Mm-hmm.
session, and so I'm going to
Yeah.
shepherd better,
Yeah.
or more faithfully, and there is something to
Mm-hmm.
that, and when you talk like this, and we're talking about challenging and disciplining and all these things, and we're talking about how we're very much guilty of our sin even, and not broken, not
Mm.
victims of it. People go, well, that's not very Christ-like. Christ calls us to be gentle, kind, and patient, and yes, he does. But that's not the same as remaining silent when we should be
Right.
speaking, or watering down
Right.
convictions to find
Right.
acceptance.
Right.
And we don't see Jesus treading lightly around the truth when he spoke to someone like the religious leaders. We don't see Jesus. We don't see Jesus, quote unquote, being nice when he's flipping tables in the
Right.
temple, right?
Right.
Um, and so, could you speak to a little bit, in this idea of preaching with a masculine key, or teaching with a masculine key, why that means that it's actually better for us, if there's a truth to be told, just to tell it unapologetically, boldly, without any qualifying statements, and let's just hit at it.
um. Wow. Well, I mean, obviously, Scripture tells us. You mentioned 2 Timothy 3:16 that there needs to be, Scripture is profitable for, correction, for reproof, right? So pointing out where the error is and straightening out the error, taking what is crooked and making it straight. So there's positive commands in Scripture. Um, as image bearers of God, and as we bear in a particular way God's fatherly kind of patriarchal way of being. I got to be careful with that, with the simplicity of God, of course. But as we kind of like image a particular aspect as men, we would actually be. I think part of that is God the Father initiates and acts and moves. He directs. He corrects. He's God the Father and God the Judge. I think those things go together. I think the judging role of God and His fatherhood, of course, are connected within Himself. So I think we would be we'd be actually kicking against the pricks of creation to not be initiators who tell the truth, who make judgments, who take charge of situations, who continue on faithfully in the face of opposition when we know that we're in a right cause. Like some of those aspects, which I think are not exclusively masculine, but are have a masculine kind of tenor to them, more so than what women. So we would actually be working against creation order, I think, to not be in the pulpit, in the class, telling truth, and we would be disobeying straightforward, positive admonitions. We would not be like Christ, the God man, who perfectly embodied it in the way he interacted with, Pharisees, like you mentioned. And I think, every age has its kind of, its truth that it suppresses and its grace that it exemplifies, right? Like, I just think maybe 200 years ago, we wouldn't have needed to tell men this, right? There was no thought of feminized kind of preaching. There wasn't "thou shalt be nice." In fact, we probably would have told Puritans, tone it down a little bit, man. 50 minutes of application is, that's like,
a little much.
Yeah.
But today, that's not the case. We
That's
actually
right.
need to.
No, that's not.
It's kind of wild. There's a book on my shelf over here. Can't remember the exact name of it. It's by Brooks E. Holyfield. I think he's a professor
Historian,
at Emory. Yeah, it's a great history. It's basically a history of like pastoral care and biblical counseling in America. And it's crazy. I mean, it's a tough read. It's a slog, but it's worth it because there's some gems in there that are, I mean, wildly eye-opening. I need to man up and read it again to remine some of the gold from it. But one of the things that was wild to see is that even in the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was actually the liberals, the theological liberals, that were onto something about the importance of masculinity in the pulpit.
Interesting.
They would basically tell the more feminine ministers, preaching is a man's work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the junior pastor, and we'll leave here was the mistake. The mistake was they said, we'll leave the home visitations and the pastoral counseling to the more feminine men and the women in the church. That's wrong. But they were half right. Right? Like, you have the president of Yale Seminary before the First World War saying, we need more football captains to become pastors. And that's not verbatim.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just kind of like, so you're telling me 110 years ago, the theological liberals were articulating things that would be blasphemous and heretical and anathema to the theological liberals today. Like they would clutch their pearls, even the men, because they're wearing them too. They would clutch their pearls and scream foul. But I think it kind of goes back to, it's just such an obvious thing that even the theological liberals that are jettisoning, just little things like the authority of Scripture and the virgin birth and miracles, they're huge things, obviously. But they were even still able to maintain the fact that, hey, preaching is a pretty masculine business and masculine work. And 100 years later, theologically orthodox men seem to not understand this like they should. To the point where, I mean, we have statements being made every year or so when some theological argument on Twitter or Facebook, people will say, no, women in the church should be able to do anything that an unordained man can do. We just don't, even in the church today, even in conservative circles, we just don't understand the difference, it seems, between like the sexual difference between men and women. An example of this that came to I think back to, I coached flag football in college, like intramurals. I coached a girls team, and I can remember very distinctly this girl on a team that I didn't coach got an interception. And she started to run the ball back down the field. And after the play was over, she spiked the football and yelled the most guttural, beastly yell I've ever heard. And I played Division I college football. I've never heard anybody. It was just like so off-putting to literally even the non-Christian guys out here we were all just like visibly and audibly repulsed by what we saw. If a guy does that in intramurals, we're kind of like, hey man, it's intramurals. Like dial back just a little bit. This is weird.
Right.
but it's not disorderly. But everybody was having this visceral reaction to how disorderly the response from that sorority girl was.
Does not nature teach?
It's exactly. And you know, less than 20 years later, I'm not sure that we would in society have the same reaction. So help us, you know, how do we make sexual differences these days intelligible to the average Christian?
Oh wow.
How do we, you know, build that out for us, Mark?
Man.
That's a real easy one, Mark.
I mean, obviously, for Christians, we start with, and this is one of the things I appreciate about Rob Gagnon, you know, in his fights against the kind of, you know, gaying of everything. He basically starts with Jesus. In the beginning, don't you know that he made us male and female? He made us male and female, so that like that hard distinction. We just establish it everywhere. So one of the little things I do in my classes, just to make sure that in our practice, we are noting that there is male and female and male and female only, is I have the girls leave class first and the boys wait and then they leave. So I'm like, okay, guys, you respect women. We respect them as the weaker vessel, give honor to them. So give them a little bit more time to get out and get to class and things like that. And then you go, you men. And I tell the boys how to treat girls. You know, don't be mean to the girls. Even when the girls are like sneaky and try to use manipulative tactics and things and think they're getting over on the male teacher when they're not.
They would never.
But I tell the boys, just, you know, be nice, absorb it. Don't clap back at them, but don't get caught up in their waves of emotional, you know, movements and things like that. So I think just emphasizing it everywhere, having boys come up and pray, just making sexual distinctions everywhere. I joke and tell people this, but you know, if I weren't a believer, I'd probably be a Nation of Islam guy. If I weren't a believer, because one of the reasons I say that is because they really just lay hold of basic creation order on this point. With the way the women dress,
they're kicking the trash,
and I'm just unapologetic about it. And I'm just like, I resonate with that and want to affirm that. And so I bring as much as I can in a sort of egalitarian-minded reform circles. I make distinctions,
and the pushback to that we get from so many moderates and squishy conservatives and let alone progressives and liberals is that, well, you know, Christianity's all about losing and dying and giving up your life. And I think to myself, yeah, but there's a manly way to die.
You die with your boots on.
You die with your boots on. Like Doc Holliday, you know, like looking down, you know, he's like, you know, looking down at the end of his bed and he's got his boots off and he's disappointed, you know, as he's dying. You know, and that's always the thing that pops into my brain when I hear pastors say that, as I'm going, we've heard that our whole lives, and now it's negative world. Teach me how to die with my boots on. Teach me how to die to self like a man. Like
one of the things I have noted, the kind of creeping egalitarianism in some wings of our groups, conservative groups. I have noticed when the pastor is, and I don't mean braggadocious or, you know, machismo or anything, but when you have a masculine pastor, like a guy who just takes initiative and he's just like, he's unflappable. He's not, there's no bravado, no much. He's humble. He's sympathetic, may even be weepy. That doesn't, the Lord wept. But when he's masculine, you don't find the women craving, even the strong women aren't craving to take his position. There's something that brings order. It's like it's like a compass.
Yeah.
That when the guy, they don't want to preach in those churches. Like the women don't rise up and like say, why can't I preach and all this? Because they see, I think they see the embodiment of reality as it's supposed to be, and they don't fight against it.
That's right. There's literally a PCUSA church within 40 minutes of mine that they're egalitarian only because, not theologically, it was just practical. They're like, there's no dudes to fill these spots. It was just accidental. It was like, it wasn't even like, I am woman, hear me roar. It was just kind of like, well, there's a gap, and Bob and George and Tom are just not interested or qualified. You
Oh
know what I
yeah.
mean? It was just,
Yeah.
and I wonder, it would be fascinating if we could get in a time machine 40 years ago and see how many PCUSA churches were in the same boat. You know, where it was like, oh, we haven't thought about this theologically at all. It's just they're willing, and there's not enough strong men. You know,
They fill a vacuum. You know.
Well, we heard that argument when another conservative Presbyterian denomination was arguing about women's roles in office, and it was, the comment was made that thankfully the churches who had women deacons were decreasing in number. But if you were to look at those churches 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that was the reason why the women started becoming deacons in the first place, is because the men just weren't taking the initiative, and they were unqualified. They were not being men as God has prescribed them to be. And so the women felt the absolute urgency to step in because this is what the church needed. And I think that brings about a really good question for you, Mark, is, we've touched on this already, this idea of, society going with the men and churches going with the men and things like that. But if you could look across the landscape of our society as it sits right now and go, here are the 3 top reasons that I think that we need stronger men in society, what would your top 3 be?
3 top reasons we need stronger men. Wow. We need.
I mean, there's so many reasons, but just, I mean, even if you don't have a top 3, what are some of the things that you're seeing right now across our cultural landscape where we're lacking good, strong men?
Obviously, judgment begins at the house of God, household of faith. And so without men leading the churches, good godly men, you lose the church. So right there is a good reason, is churches. And being in the negative world, the oppositional nature of culture against just boringly obvious or boringly basic Christianity is intense. God has made men to withstand that, to be the prophets in that time. So I think that, but perhaps even more fundamentally, we need black, well, actually white, brown, red, yellow. I'm thinking the black community and just a complete collapse, almost near collapse of fathers. So fathers generally, it's just for families. You don't have a society, you don't have a functional civilization if you don't have a functioning family. So just those are the 2 key institutions, right? The first governments, individual government, family government, church. And then I think if you have strong churches and strong fathers, you're going to have a strong state. I think the state is a kind of is derivative from family, from the smaller society, right? And solid churches. Interesting. Our first enumerated right in our Constitution is religion, freedom of religion. So we need good churches. So I think those 2. I mean, we could also talk about how the economy has become a commodities economy, which means that baby boomers are making most of the money through their investments already in their work, and it's not through wages. So we actually need more men to work. We need more, we're becoming deindustrialized in the West, and so our infrastructure. I live in Pittsburgh, which has 466 bridges. One of them collapsed 2 years ago, So you see the infrastructure collapsing. Well, women don't build skyscrapers. Women don't make bridges. So you need men to actually establish just the infrastructure of the nation, and also build back up our wage force. So those 3.
Yeah, it really is. I don't say this as some sort of male chauvinistic, women suck, men are great kind of thing. But if we Thanos snapped all the men out of the world tomorrow,
collapse.
How fast does society collapse? I mean, I would say within 72 hours, be that fast or less. If you Thanos snap all the girls, all the women out of society, life is going to get real bleak and dark. But we're gonna make it for a couple decades before we all start dying out. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be very depressing. It's going to be very terrible.
But it would develop for a while.
It would develop, but you know what I mean? So, and I think the way someone once put it is that men are protological and women are eschatological. You know, there really is something to the phrase, I bring home the bacon and she cooks it. I can't tell you how many times, you know, like here's a great example. So yesterday I'm trying to feed the boys a quick lunch before I leave the house. I took one plate, you know, like a 10-inch plate. I chopped up 2 apples. I mean, crudely chopped them up, threw them in the middle. I've got chunks of meat and crackers and like just weird cut blocks of cheese all around. I'm like, there you go, guys. You're going to survive. So today they asked my wife for the same thing, and she takes a photo. And this is like magazine cover charcuterie board. All the same ingredients with a couple more, some pretzels and some chips. Looks beautiful. I'm like, I want to come home and eat. You know, like I got
like artwork.
Yeah, I'm going, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But and like the joy on their faces in this photos of eating it is way better than what I got when I threw the same stuff in front of them yesterday, because they, you know, so there's a clear difference in the two of us. You give me the exact same ingredients in the same kitchen, my meal is going to have the same nutritional value that my wife's does, but the presentation and the aesthetic nourishment that it brings is going to be vastly different.
We till they fill.
And, that's right. They were sustained, right, with food, but they didn't have nearly the joy of eating.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
You know,
it was a really joyless plate of food, pretty much.
You know, it's really interesting, Mark, that you brought up those 3 points, because the first 2 of them, I was on vacation and we went to the Bahamas with a couple of couples here from the church. And we were the person who was managing the house that we had rented. He was an associate pastor, and so he invited us to come to their church that Lord's Day, and we were looking for somewhere to attend anyway. And so we went with him, and we went to the service and worshiped with those dear brothers and sisters in Jesus. And afterwards, though, I wanted to go speak to the pastor, and we were talking back and forth, and it was quote unquote back to school Sunday or something along those lines, and we just started talking, and he gave this really hard exposition of Genesis 1, and really just threw it in the face of men. He was like, it's back to school Sunday. There's 150 people, 160 people here, and we gave gifts to like 18 kids. He said, men, that's on you, because you haven't taken the mandates of Christ seriously. You know, you're not getting married, you're not having babies, you're not producing families, and so that, of course, it caught my attention, because I mean he was blunt, and I appreciated it, but I wanted to see why he felt like that was what he needed to say at like a back to school Sunday kind of thing. And he was saying that in the Bahamas, we were on the island of Exuma. He said the women are highly educated. Most of them go to Canada for some sort of educational training, and they come back home, and there are no men really doing or pursuing any sort of career. It's hard to find a man worth marrying, you know. And he said, and because of that, the churches suffer, and because of that, their island, their government even has suffered. And we had a long conversation about that, and that was so fascinating to me, that even if the man had some sort of education for some reason, and I see this across our own cultural landscape, men are allergic to hard work, and you know, and I agree with you 100%. And we're getting into some of the conversation about, you know, what do we do about it? You know, but we have definitely seen our own society suffer for the reasons you mentioned and a host of others, right? That you know, a good, strong, godly man really would have made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that, and it kind of, not kind of, it actually absolutely does tie into what you were talking about with the idea of men are motivated by challenge. Here recently, we've seen a lot of young men angry because of the assassination of one of their political heroes, Charlie Kirk. We're dealing with that in small town Dillon, South Carolina too, and it seems like this has really captured this Generation Z, especially the men, in going, we've got to pick up the mantle and we've got to go to work. Here it is that a Christian man was murdered publicly for his views on sex, for his views on the economy, his political views, but also his biblical views, and this is something worth fighting for. And it, I think even Charlie Kirk would be so excited about the response that he's seeing, that we're seeing after his death. But why? Why does it take something as gruesome and as public and as wicked as that to motivate people?
So many, so many, like, I think we are probably at a nexus point in our culture, right, where all these factors come together. I just heard this morning that the median age for first-time homeowners, median age, 56. It used to be below 30.
Unreal.
Used to be below 30. Those kind of like novice entry level wage jobs, like working in the service industry and all that stuff, that's gone now, right? Everybody's using that for full time. They're using that for living wage, where kids used to be able to kind of come up and quickly develop their skills as a teenager, going into like a more larger, higher wage earning jobs in their 20s after college or trade school or something like that. So there's so many things going on. The baby boomers held on to power, control of everything for so long. I mean, we have a 79-year-old president now. We just had an 81-year-old. I'm Gen X. We haven't even had a Gen X president.
Right.
That's true.
So there's just like all that building frustration, the black pill effect. I think the emergence of kind of discord and some of these like dark web stuff where young disaffected men could get together and just kind of discuss, and get black pilled. So just so many cultural factors, I think, have come together to bring this deep level. Oh, I also read a couple places, like it used to be young women were the highest, I think, suicide victims, right? Now it's like 50-year-old white men are like the number one. Like, it's just crazy what has happened to men. Like, the whole society is just almost like conspired against males, and especially white males. Let's just say that, right? I mean, honestly, Jeremy Carl's book, The Neglected Class or something, The Neglected Group. So I think a lot of those factors are in the air, and they just kind of like are conspiring together to incline men to just like, and then all of a sudden you get a Charlie Kirk who's just this unusual, and he's young. He's just, he was the very bottom edge of the millennials, right? He's almost a Zoomer, almost a Z. Yep. He is like putting up a fight, succeeding, getting acclaim, and he gets taken out. I could just see guys just going, what's the point?
Yeah, and while we're definitely in a crux in our society, and there's a lot of things to be very optimistic about. Seeing Gen Z men wanting families, wanting children, seeing them attracted to old paths, Christian faith, right? They don't want the they don't want the mega church. They don't want the seeker sensitive church. They want a church, a worship, a liturgy, a doctrine that has stood the test of time, right? And so you're seeing the rise in Presbyterianism, Anglicanism. You're even seeing guys go
Eastern Orthodox,
Catholicism, and Greek Orthodox, because of this desire. And so while we're facing this real crossroads. There's a lot to be optimistic about, but also uh, it helps us to realize that there is work to be done, because we the society and the church is not going to benefit by a new generation of Andrew
Right.
Tates. We need godly men, right? And so that's where the church really needs to step up to disciple and to teach these young guys, because because they are so hungry for it, that they will absolutely go find the answer somewhere. And so we need godly men in the church and in the academy and in schools and in society to really show them what godly masculinity, biblical masculinity is.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I mean, God has made us for this. He's made us to serve him in hard times. I mean, the best church literature stuff we get, right, is with the collapse of the Roman Empire. We get Augustine, right, in the most brilliant history, biblical, theological book ever written. And he's made us for this. So it's an opportunity for us to step up. And the church really does its best work in hard times, right? Exile times. Hard times make strong men, create strong men. So I'm excited.
I think Gen Z is the most cause-oriented generation alive right now. And I was on a call on Twitter. I don't even know what you call it. Spaces on X. I don't know. It's basically a Zoom call on Twitter. And a young Gen Z guy spoke up and he was like, yeah, we're done. We're done with these reformed complementarians and egalitarians. We want, we're just, and my caution, a denomination is kind of like a society. We see this with the PCUSA. They're literally dying. They've been dying for decades. I think if the PCA continues to allow feminism in all of its little forms to remain inside our denomination, there will be a lot of young, godly, conservative, motivated young men from Gen Z that are just going to have nothing to do with us. And, my my posture towards these kinds of men is I would rather have 100 Gen Z guys that are maybe fired up and a little angry and need to be coached and counseled and pastored. I'd rather have 100 of them than 100 guys that are just kind of going with the flow, still living like it's positive world or neutral world, don't know what time it is, just kind of like, oh shucks, pietistic, whatever, we're just here and then we die and we're in heaven, just spare me. Those guys are nearly impossible to light a fire under. But that's where we are. We're like the guys have both mentioned, we're in negative world. We just saw the public assassination of an openly Christian man who's espousing pretty, in the grand scheme of things, pretty moderate right of center kind of social views and political views. And his assassin was someone deeply confused about gender and gender roles and everything else, sexuality. And I think the Gen Z men are kind of looking at that and they're going, if a church doesn't get gender right, if they don't get sexuality right, I want no part of it. And even in the PCA, we're still struggling with sexuality.
Yeah. Anthropology, right? More than soteriology.
Yep.
I mean, we got justification down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we don't know what a man is. We don't know what the man who's being justified is. That's part of the problem. And I think I've asked this to more than one guy who's kind of working on doctoral stuff. I'm like, hey, ask your professors, like, what's the next part of systematics that's going to need, like, because we just saw how doctrine of God, Trinity stuff is kind of being recovered in light of the terrible Trinitarian doctrine. It's the foundation of the whole complementarian biblical manhood womanhood movement.
Subordination.
That's been recovered. And the answer I've gotten from different pockets of the Reformed world is anthropology. There needs to be a recovery of a truly reformed anthropology, understanding what man is, what woman is. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm not the guy, but maybe this podcast can help inspire the guy who will, be one of the first PhD candidates to kind of help us think historically and biblically about those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So, Mark, tell us a little bit about, when we were talking to kind of figure out what direction we would go today, you used the phrase moral cosmology. What is that, and help us understand how that's important?
First, I'm not even actually sure that's an accurate phrase. I mean, I used it. I don't know if it's like makes sense. But here's what I mean by that. Here's what made me think about that. I remember years ago watching a guy get ordained in the I was ordained in the Metro New York Presbytery. Very interesting. And one of the guys was getting ordained, and he was asked about some question about complementarianism or something, about male, female, or whatever. And I can't remember exactly what the question was, but his answer was, I don't know why God says it, but he says men are to exercise, authority in the church. But he didn't know why. So I think what that made me think is a lot of people see the command for men to be elders, men to be the head, as just a kind of hanging out there floating command, a positive command, detached from any kind of natural order, like our creation order. So
grace and nature are divorced.
So cosmology. So that's what I was getting at with cosmology, like the world of sex, like God's commands cohere with creation, right? Special revelation doesn't contradict general revelation in nature. So that's what I was getting at. And so I think we need, and thankfully the Catholics are the big natural law people, right? Protestants, like Anglicans.
It drives me nuts being a Protestant living in America that Catholics are in the Supreme Court. They're crushing natural law.
Nobody thinks there's good logic, good creational logic for why men need to step up and lead.
Yeah. It's, I think part of the problem is we use the world, like the word world, in so many different ways theologically.
Right.
And I think people are like, well, his kingdom's not of this world.
Yeah. Gnosticism.
And so we're like, or we say like, well, the world is our enemy, or the world is against us. And it's like, okay, don't think created order when we use that word. Think like culture, city of man, to go back to Augustine, right? City of man, not versus city of God. We're not talking about the world in the sense of God's good created order. In that sense of the use of the world, the church and grace are running with and echoing and in harmony and in unity with the world, And so I think that's part of the problem. It's kind of like the word flesh.
Yeah.
And whenever the Bible uses the flesh, like, well, we have to figure out in what sense is the Bible using the word flesh? Because I've heard people say, well, the Bible talks about the flesh in this way, so like death is like being freed from this bad thing. It's like, no. Flesh in that context is sin nature. It's not talking about your physical body. Like Jesus was resurrected in real life.
Right.
He had a real body.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I kind of wonder if we're not thinking carefully enough about the way we use these terms.
Yeah.
And so people just kind of like, we just kind of assume that the people in the pulpits and the people in our Sunday school classes and our Bible classes, they know exactly what we're talking about when we're referencing these different.
I think a lot of it too is, how Peter says Lot vexed his righteous soul with the things he saw and heard. Like, so what would cause a man to offer his two daughters to, pagans, right? That's a person who's getting worn down by the wickedness of the environment. I think Christians, we participate in this kind of postmodern, late modernity moment of expressive individualism where feeling becomes reality, right? And so I think you're immersed in that, and you go through like I did 13 years of public school. You just kind of imbibe that, and I think we just don't tend to think metaphysically about nature anymore. We tend to think expressive individualistically, and we decouple our actions, we decouple our bodies from that larger kind of creation thing. And I just think Christians like unwittingly imbibe that And so when you hear the command, men should be the pastors, they're like, why is that? That's just a piece of antiquated positive law.
Yep.
So anyway, I think there's, in addition to the way we confuse terms, like you're saying, Nate, I think we also just are getting worn down by the late Western moment we're in.
Yeah. We don't really, we just kind of, it's kind of like dispensationalism. I tell people here in the South, dispensationalism is like, has been vaporized into the air that you breathe. And so there's all these different things based on where you live in the United States, different theologies that you don't even realize at times how you're breathing them in, how you're kind of taking them on and absorbing them. And yeah, I think feminism is one of those, and it's all of its different nefarious forms. Some of them are overt and some are more subversive. We just don't recognize at times how feminism or individualism are kind of creeping into our thinking or shaping our thinking in different ways. And yeah, and so then we wake up one day and we don't really know which way is up, and we don't know how we got there and why we do certain things. And it's almost like critical foundational things are kind of assumed, and we don't faithfully pass down from one generation to the next a real cohesive understanding of the why. You know, you'll hear business gurus all the time talk about, well, you gotta answer the question why. You know, you gotta find the why. You know, and the reason that's people hear those kind of TED Talks or presentations or whatever, those YouTube videos, and it goes so viral is because that really is such an important question to answer, and they've never thought about it before. Oh wow, I've never asked why. I've asked what and how. And it's the same thing in church. It's the same thing in teaching. We have to be able to answer from the pulpit and from the lectern in Sunday school class, why? You know,
Can you guys see
why?
me? I'm
Why
sorry.
is it? It's not just some arbitrary rule that God has given, but there's actually a way that God has designed the world to work and be, and His instructions to His people, whether it's Israel or now the church, are grounded in that. They're not contrary or running against the foundations of the world in which he laid by the power of His voice. They're in concert with it. So I think that's something I've tried to think through lately is how do I answer that question? Why? How do I not just assume that my people are going to get the presuppositions that they need to have in order for this to all make sense? Because I don't want to raise a generation of young men in my church that hold the position that I hold, but don't understand the why for it.
Can you guys see me?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that, you know, in our circles in the PCA, we're having a lot of conversations regarding, you know, this idea of the church speaking into the culture, or even training our people to think about life in the civic square at all. And I think this whole why question is really important for us to contemplate, because this whole idea of assuming, right, or not thinking about the ways in which our Bible uses terminology like world, but it's one of those things where if we're really to train up our people, especially our guys, our men, how to have a biblical worldview, don't we have to address some of these cultural moments or even political moments? Don't we have to apply the scriptures to all spheres of life? You know, no one blinks an eye when we start, you know, hemming down fathers for provoking their children to anger, or you know, or even to be a better dad. You know, so many times when we get into, you know, something like Father's Day, you hear a huge lecture about how our men are absolutely terrible in the home. But no one really blinks an eye, do they? But the moment we start talking about, you know, life in the civil sphere, life in the political square, you know, Christian life and their response to cultural moments of the day, we all of a sudden get this, you know, this radical two kingdoms view and going, wait, we can't speak to those things, you know, because the kingdom of Christ is quote unquote not of this world, right? And so that's something that I've been trying to become very intentional about in my own teaching and preaching, is to help us think through the scriptural principles, and to cause us to really contemplate what this means for us in this very moment. It's just like Mark was saying, we're in this crux for a purpose. The whole Esther, such a time as this, is true.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lord has entrusted us to do a good work here in this cultural setting, in this negative world, on the heels of a new generation going, enough is enough. And I think we don't need to shy away from it at all. We need to tackle it head on and help our people to think about something like a political assassination that definitely has some religious undertones to it. We need to help our people think through what it means to be the light and salt in the middle of this. I just think we're way too slow in our teaching and preaching. The church is way too slow in addressing these things, and addressing them head on. It goes back to niceness. It goes back to wanting a seat at the table, which led to compromise, and it goes back to this seeker-sensitive thing. There's a whole host of reasons why we've developed this slowness to speak on these matters, but we can't afford to do that anymore.
That's right.
We can't afford to do the third wayism any longer. We've tried that; it failed, and it's time to go storm the hill.
Yeah. Paul has told us, as far as we are able, as far as it is up to us, we should live at peace with all men, and that's a timeless biblical truth. And yet, I would also add to that we are living in a world where our neighbors have made it very clear, we're not going to have peace with you. That's the score. That's the reality of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we should do what we can to, particularly when it comes to political things. Paul reminds us, bless those who persecute you, pray for them, and in doing so, you're going to heap burning coals upon their head. And we're reminded by Psalm 11 that the Lord who's on our side, he rains burning coals on the enemies of his people in judgment. And so, there's a way that we are to conduct ourselves. There's a way that we can respond culturally and as individuals, as families, as men, collectively. And we should. Because we cannot afford, if we love our neighbor, if we love our trans neighbor, if we love our feminist neighbor, we cannot sit back idly by and allow the magistrate and allow the culture to continue to feast upon them. In a civil sense, there's a lot of sheep out there without a shepherd.
Yep.
Because those ordained and called by God to wield the sword have failed to do so. And we should advocate for them, and we should plead the case of Christ, plead the cause of Jesus. And as Psalm 2 tells us, we ought to remind the rulers and judges of the earth to kiss the Son, lest he be angry, to pay homage to the Son. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. So, Mark, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you guys see me?
We can. We got you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I had to put the charger in for a little bit. Those are great
good.
thoughts, guys. I would just say, leading with repentance here, I'm a recovering third way guy. Where I was kind of like, not this way, not that way. Let me stand above it. And I suppose that works when you still have moral consensus in the society. Like good moral consensus, positive world, you can kind of be third way because you're not actually damaging a good moral consensus around them. When everybody basically agrees on everything but has a dime's worth of difference in economic policy, right?
Yep.
But I'm repenting, seeking to be explicitly salt and light in the sense that it really does shine in the darkness. It really does serve as a preservative against the decay. That speaks
Amen.
the truth and love. You're right. I mean, I think about transvestites and homosexuals and things like that. It really is just, it's cruelty to not lovingly speak the truth into such darkness. So
Yeah.
I'm with you on that. My preaching has been slowly changing over years' time to be more direct, more antithesis, less looking for all the common grace. I think that's easy in our circles to
Yeah, it
look for the
is.
common grace,
Yep.
but to really see the antithesis that's right at the heart of things between wickedness and righteousness and the godly and the ungodly and the pagans and things like that. So I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The we saw third wayism, and I was the same way. Even as a millennial, and I was probably way too late in recognizing that we were in a negative world, because as the world progressed in their wickedness, third wayism started leading to compromise, and then we couldn't compromise fast enough to keep a seat at the table, right?
Right.
And we saw that with guys who made third wayism kind of their rally cry, where finally enough was enough, and they went, I can't go that far, and then the cancel culture came out, and just bullied them off the scene almost, and that's why Aaron Renn's Life in a Negative World book was so impactful to me, because if you look at the positive Christian world where the seeker sensitive movement was so prevalent, then you look at the neutral Christian world where kind of third wayism was so prevalent. The answer for real lasting influence was just be who we are. Be Bible believing Christians who are going to say, this is what the Bible says, this is what I believe, and just say it and stick to it, and don't water it down, don't hide your Bibles, and just be unapologetically who Christ has called you to be. That's really now Aaron Renn's whole argument is that's the only option for us now. And he's like, but that was the answer in the neutral world and the positive world as well. And in the church, overall, I would say the church in America, not just Presbyterians, but the church in America was way too quick to become seeker sensitive, to become compromising with real biblical doctrine, but we wanted a seat at the table, and a seat at the table just does not seem like a possibility at this time for us. And so it goes back to that hill. So we're just going to storm the hill, and go fight for absolute truth, because we do believe that is the most loving thing we can do for the world.
Yeah.
And Doug Kelly, good friend of mine, former professor at RTS, Jackson and Charlotte, he says, he often says, if God is the creator of the world, then he is best and most fit to tell us how it ought to run. And
that's good.
Amen.
And I'm, and it goes, I'm always, when he says that, I'm always reminded of Stephen Charnock, and that it's his right to be the governor of the world, because he created it. Dr. Kelly takes a little bit different of a spin, but I think they're saying the same thing. If he's the creator, then he's best fit to tell us how it ought to operate.
That's right. If he's creator, sustainer, and redeemer, how could anybody else rule this world?
Right. So that was really good. Mark, if you have 5 minutes for one more question, I was about to ask this question, then we lost you for a minute or two.
Okay, sure.
But I think, because we have a school underneath our umbrella, because our associate pastor teaches classes at our school as well, we talk about this all the time, and I want I want to hear your thoughts. How do we help young men become better thinkers? You know, and we were talking about biblical worldview and all these things. How do we help our young men really start thinking biblically about the world? It's one thing to teach them math, right? It's another thing to, and we're all about biblical integration at our school. But you know, they can have all the right answers to the math equations, and then totally miss why we believe something we believe, as we were going back to in a previous conversation. So, how have you tried to help young guys in your classroom think more deeply and more biblically about the world around them? It's hard.
Easy question, huh? Wow.
Oh my, look at the time, he says.
That's right. You know what? I said I had 5 minutes, but I don't anymore.
Wow. You know, I don't know. I feel like I envision the kind of the sage wisdom, the kind of delivering of wisdom to boys, like, you know, the Proverbs, listen, my son. And I feel like I'm just like telling guys, okay, you want to be a king? Think this way, believe this. I tell them, okay, when we engage the Bible, I'm going to challenge you guys. You need to read deeply. You need to think critically. Then when you answer, communicate clearly, work diligently in all these things, and let's do it all to God's glory. So I give them little rhyme in the work. I don't know. I think I just try. It's that whole masculine key thing I'm doing, and I'm downloading in the style of ancient Near Eastern wisdom disclosure. I feel like I'm kind of downloading a wise worldview and just saying, you know, think this way, guys. Be this way. When you confront this, which you haven't yet, this is what's going to happen, right? Like the way the Proverbs is kind of like the wise man foresees the day of evil, hides himself. We think out in the future. So I don't know. I just see. I envision myself as an older person, elder at the gates, kind of giving practical wisdom and helping them to walk it out within the context of the class. So we think a lot about wisdom, recovery of the classical way of engaging with like grammar, logic, rhetoric. I helped the boys argue. Like when we were doing the Psalms, I had two boys come up and debate exclusive psalmody versus inclusive psalmody. The boys learn a lot that way. That's agonism. That's debate. That's persuasion. They're at that age where they want to argue for their beliefs and battle each other. And, you know, so I don't know. I think I'm just using ancient methods around wisdom. And hopefully some of that will seep into the bones of the habitus, how they practice, how they walk out. You know, pedagogy is not just like giving them information. It's actually walking with them to the point where they're sitting down and taking in the information, right? It's like it happens in the after classroom discussions and things like that. And in the hallway, I'll poke one of them and say, why'd you do that? Or how are you doing with this? And you know, if I hear one of them's dating, I'm like, okay, tell me how you're treating her. You know, it's like it happens in the outside the classroom, things like that. In the gym, you guys are coaches, you know. There's all those moments that have a more profound impact than I think we realize. Yeah, it's the things that little things said in the off conversations. Like the things I remember most, just even growing up in lessons from my dad, they're just the off moment conversations. You know, I was going to the bathroom and my dad said, don't think about what they don't listen to what people say, watch what they do, right? Stuff like that. So I don't know. That's how I feel. Yep. I know it's a formal environment and you do the formal things, but I'm thinking larger in terms of just kind of like modeling wisdom disclosure. Yeah. Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's the curriculum and there's the co-curriculum,
modeling's
which
huge.
is those little moments
remember what
in
you
between
were like.
the formal instruction that really
more than this.
That really makes such a big difference. Yep. Yeah, I think a great example of that, my high school football coach, very successful guy. First year at our school in 1995, he took a team with 17 players and went to they took them to the state championship and they lost. And then they were back the next year They had 22 guys this time, and they
Oh,
won.
wow.
And then they a year later or 2 years later, they went on we went 4 in a row, and I was a freshman during that fourth one. And the photo of him holding the trophy after the championship game, he just looked so unenthused to be there. It was like he was just not overwhelmed and impressed to be in the spotlight. To me, that's a lesson that really sticks out of my brain is to act like you've been there before. And, I think he just, the way he carried himself too, and success was just,
it's taught,
something for me to model. But he never explained that to us. He never like sat us down and was like, "Hey, look, guys." It was just, you kind of look at it and you're like, why does he look like this in every one of these 5 or 6 state championship photos as he's receiving the trophy? Why does he look like it's awkward for him to be there? I think that's kind of the way that I want to respond is because he was just all about praising his assistant coaches and his
my phone's going to
and
die, guys, here in a minute.
Quickly get the spotlight 10%. To where he felt like it belongs. So, anyway, that's an example that sticks out in my mind. Yeah. Well, you've given us so much of your time.
This is good.
And we're thankful for you, Mark. We look forward to having you back sometime in the future.
My privilege, guys. Thanks.
And maybe we'll tease some more of these things out. But that's going to do it for us today,
guys.
Good to
meet you, Matt.
Thank you so much for being with us, Mark. Yeah.
Thank y'all. Thank you, Mark.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Good to meet you. Yep.